This show has been brought to you by Smith's Detection and the National Air Traffic Controllers Association.
My voice is the voice that guides you home safely each and every day.
24 hours a day, 365 days a year.
I am the voice of the safest and most efficient airspace in the world.
I have to be 100% of the time.
I am.
I am.
I am.
I am a professional air traffic controller.
Hello, I'm Colleen Chamberlain, AAAE's Vice President of Transportation Security Policy. Welcome to this edition of One-on-One. I'm joined here in the studio with Paul Leyh, Director of Compliance at the Transportation Security Administration. Paul's been in his position for almost 3 years now as the Director of Compliance, but he's been with the agency for over a decade, almost 12 years, starting in the Secure Flight Program, working with policy and industry engagement, and also in the field as a Federal Security Director. Paul, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to focus our time today exclusively on outcome-focused compliance, or OFC for short, because it's not a program if it doesn't have an acronym, right?
That's right.
Your office spent most of 2017 working on this initiative, developing it not only internally, but also externally with your compliance advisory group that included representatives from airports and air carriers. After all that hard work, outcome-focused compliance officially launched on October 1st. So Paul, can you tell us about what exactly outcome-focused compliance is and why it's important?
Yeah, sure, Colleen, thanks. And thanks for doing this. I know we've been talking about this, for the past 6 months or so as we continue to develop outcome-focused compliance. So really to begin is the background on this is that when I looked at a 5-year history of and I'll use airports for a second, is that the history of airports is that over 5 years we had over 12,000 findings. And when I looked at that a little bit further, we found that there were about 8,600 of them that were really closed with counseling. And the others wound up in EIRs. But from that, there were only about 3% that actually wound up as civil penalties. So I looked at that and said, hey, we're doing a lot of work to get to the same place, either doing an LOC or an airport just fixing the issue. So looking at that, said, wouldn't it be better if up front we said, here's the vulnerabilities, here's the risk at each one of the airports, and let's focus on how we fix it. Us and industry focus on how we could fix it, how we could jointly look at mitigation plans to identify or help identify what those issues are, fix the issue, and the outcome is better security. So that was kind of the genesis of this. And then what I did is said, I want some industry people in here, whether it's from airports, airlines, and together with TSA people, let's figure out how we can make this work. And so for the past year, that's what they've been doing, is figuring out how to make it work. So the end result of that is going to be better security. And hopefully, it's not going to be just a way to have less EIRs or LOIs, if you will. The idea is to get better security.
That's great. That's great. So the program officially launched last month, October 1. So we're about a month and a half into it.
Yeah.
How's it going? Is it too early for any lessons learned? Are there challenges? Is there some things you have to go back to the drawing board for?
There's both. There's both. And so first on the positive side is that we found that in the first month there's over 30 compliance programs, if you will, outcome-focused compliance programs that have started between airports and TSA. And what they did is that was a joint collaboration between TSA and industry. And there were actually a handful of volunteer disclosures as well. So on the positive side, that was a really good thing. On the challenges is that there's still some misunderstandings out there. and a couple of the programs are still a little bit cumbersome to use. So those, in fact, two programs in particular are ones that, as I've heard, both from industry and from TSA, is that we have to figure out ways to make it easier, less cumbersome to use. So I took that and went back then to our team and said, I want you to work with industry. I want you to go through the through our advisory group, figure out ways to make this less cumbersome, and to get to that outcome faster and more effectively. So they're in the process of doing that. Second thing that we're learning is about the communications piece. There's still some miscommunication out there, still some misunderstanding about the program. So what I've done is last week I had a call with all of the AFSDIs and said, look, guys, I need you to go back out and talk to industry, talk to the airports, talk to all the other regulated parties, explain to them what OFC is. So, that I've asked them to do that, but one of the things I'm going to ask of industry is if you don't understand it fully, call your AFSDI, call your FSD, ask them, how do you make this work? How does it work?
Right. Well, and that's why we appreciate you taking the time to come here today, because this is, I think, an important initiative and a shared objective. I mean, airports share TSA's security mission, and we want to get to the better outcome and not just be chasing down nuisance violations or paperwork. And so we recognize the importance of that. In terms of that, clarifying exactly what OFC is and isn't, is it something that airports or regulated parties have to opt into? Is there something I have to sign to participate in this program?
Well, that's a great question. And I've gotten that a few times in the past month. The answer is no. There's really nothing that has to be signed up. It's a voluntary program. That really, the TSA is a regulatory agency. We have the ability to go out, as we normally have done in regulated industry, and do all the things that we normally do, inspections and that sort of thing. The idea behind this is that for industry to understand and look at what their vulnerabilities are and work with TSA to address those vulnerabilities. Now, there's things that as we look at data, and let's talk about that for a second, is that there's a lot of data that we've been providing to industry, like what the history is. There's a compliance history, and we'll say we'll do that. The testing that we've done, things like ComSet, we've shared all that data. And so, and as we all know what is behind ComSet, it's you do test, and then you talk about what the test results were, how you can mitigate the vulnerability associated with that testing, and then do testing again. Well, on the industry side, we know that there's also testing being done, and there's other data that you have, and the idea is to share that data with TSA to use for the betterment of security, to identify what those vulnerabilities are. Now, what we ask you to do is sign an MOU. The idea behind the MOU is to protect the data for what it is. Okay. And so that we can't share it. I mean, we can't share it anyhow, but it really protects the data. So that's the one thing that we ask you to sign. Okay.
And that's actually protecting the data on both sides,
it
right?
Is.
That's actually helpful to the
it
regulated
is.
parties as well.
And it is. And what we've done is that we went out when we first started developing this, is we put a boilerplate MOU together. And we had, different parties in industry look at it and give comments on it. So we do have a boilerplate MOU, excuse me, that on a local basis is that they could make any adjustments with local attorneys on either side for that MOU. But the idea is for a local basis to develop the MOU and sign off on it.
And now I know there's some documents and information posted for airports on the TSA Secure web board on his end. I think the MOU is one of it. Are there other tools available under this OFC umbrella that airports should be aware of or part of the OFC initiative?
Well, there's the Voluntary Disclosure Program, and that should be posted as well. One of the things that we also do is we've talked a lot about the risk register. And the risk register is something that we want the AFSDIs and or the FSDs to sit with industry and walk them through what that risk register is. In essence, what it is that there's about almost 1,000 regulations that there is on industry, whether it's on aviation, cargo, airports, and so on. As we broke those things into high risk, medium risk, and low risk. And the idea is to sit with industry and say, let's focus together on the high risk items. Now, it's going to vary from airport to airport, what there is,
right.
but to be able to sit with industry and go through those and understand what they are, and then put a mitigation plan in once we both decide that this is what we want to focus on.
That's great. Excellent. So if folks haven't heard about this or have further questions, it's really, you encourage them to reach out locally to their FSD and AFSDI.
I do. I ask them to do that. I ask them to go on to HISN and see, you know, that, and it's a thing that, that they could always call their AFSDI, call their inspector. The idea is to get them information as soon as possible about it. And then if there's any questions, they could call you. You could call me.
Right. Exactly.
We do this a lot.
Absolutely. Well, that's getting to my next question. Is there anything that AAAE and our airport members can do to help, you know, the success of OFC?
I have to tell you that over the past year, this has been truly a great, I think, working relationship with industry. It's really collaborative development of a program that I think is going to be, ultimately is going to be really good for both of us. If I was to script this a year ago, I couldn't have scripted any better. I think that we've got great cooperation and collaboration on this. I think the one thing is we have to continue to put the messaging out there. And any questions you have, I need to know those right away so I could address them. So, you know, my ask is that anybody who sees, if they got a question about it, certainly if you've got a list of questions that they give you, let me know so that I could address those things. I really want this thing to address any issues that are out there. So I appreciate you doing that.
Absolutely. And so we're a month and a half in or so, some, you know, lessons learned and some successes already, a few challenges that you can tweak. I know your compliance advisory group's continuing to meet and help advise on this, but what do you see a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now? What do you hope the impact of outcome-focused compliance will be? Why is this important to TSA?
So let me start with the short term first. I think the short term over the, and you had mentioned it, over the course of the next year, I think that we're going to have a lot of lessons learned on this. And so my commitment to industry is that we're going to meet quarterly as our working group to see what the results were and address any of those results and look for better ways to do it. So I think within the next year, that any issues that we find, we could address. Going 3 years, 5 years down the road, I see better security. You know, that I think over the past 5 years, we spent a lot of time chasing regulations. And I don't think it does any side any good to just chase regulations.
Absolutely.
I think that if we have the opportunity and ability to both sit down and look at what the vulnerabilities are and what the risks are, and I think that in the 3 years that we're all going to trust each other enough that we could have those conversations and truly have those conversations, I think it will get us to that point. It's going to be work in progress over the next year. I know that, but I'm pretty confident we're going to get there.
Excellent. Well, again, we want to help you get there because it's important to our airport members as well, that the basis of trust and then really focusing on those things that are going to improve security.
Sure.
And not just, you know, playing gotcha or chasing paperwork. And so we really appreciate it, Paul. Thank you so much for joining us here today. If you want to learn more about outcome-focused compliance, as we mentioned, there's a number of documents and tools up on the TSA Secure Web Board, as well as AAAE's website when appropriate. Also, Paul is going to be joining us for the Airports Only session following the AAAE Aviation Security Summit coming up here December 5th and 6th in Crystal City, Virginia. Appreciate that. That's the closed door session for the airport attendees following our day-and-a-half summit program. So I hope you all can join us then. And thanks so much for watching this edition of One on One.